Hello, my name is Matthew Harris. I'm working for the Mississippi Valley Library District. Today is February 2nd, 2017. Today we're going to be interviewing Killian Weir. We're currently in the American Legion meeting room at the Fairmont City Library. Mr. Weir, when and where were you born?
I was born in East St. Louis, Illinois, on March 11th, 1967.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My parents are Brian and Cecilia Weir. I'm very lucky to have them still with us today. She was a housewife and he was an electrician. I am the fifth of 8 children. They had 6 boys in a row, and then a girl, and then a boy and a girl. People used to have big families back then.
Were any of your siblings or any other family members in the military?
My grandpa on my mom's side went to enlist when World War II broke out. So, like everybody else in that generation, he drug himself down to the recruiting station. And they took his information and everything, and they said, "Dude, you got 4 daughters at home." And they're like, "Thank you very much, but you're much more needed at home." So he came back home. My grandfather on my dad's side, both of them were the first Americans, the first kids in their family to grow up in America. My grandpa, on my dad's side, Grandpa Weir, he served in the Merchant Navy, the Merchant Marine, they called it. And it was kind of like he served on a ship and they went around offloading supplies and stuff in the Atlantic. From my dad's side, a whole bunch of my uncles served in the Korean War. Another uncle served in the National Guard during the Detroit riots of 1968. My Uncle Steve, he was on an aircraft carrier for about 20 years. Let me see any other. My older brother, he was in when they bombed Muammar Gaddafi back in that war with Libya about 1982. My younger brother served 2 years in the Navy as well. And I think that's all. And I still have cousins and nephews we've all been in the military a long time. We're poor people, and we know that the military offers you a lot of options that aren't generally available on the streets in East St. Louis, Illinois.
Okay. What were you doing before you joined?
Okay, this was about 1989, 1990. I was a night manager in a paint sundries warehouse. This was like before Walmart was here, so they actually were like small businesses. And we had our headquarters in St. Louis, and we would sell paint supplies to all these little mom and pop joints. Most of them got put out of business within the next 5 years, but we'd pull the orders, we'd load the truck, and we'd ship them off. And every night it would be like me or 2 or 3 other guys, and we would just be driving our forklifts around, picking orders, get out of work at 8 o'clock in the morning. But we listened to country music back then. And there you could tell very much so that there was a build-up to war coming. And they were scaring us real good. Now, this wasn't the America we got today. We're always at war. Back then, we hadn't been to war really since Vietnam. And so there was this big build-up to war, and they were telling us that Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi army were the 10th most powerful fighting force in the world, and we were in for our first real war in a long time. And you hear that stuff, and the machine feeds you, and you think back to all the John Wayne movies you saw over the years and the Hogan's Heroes. And there's war coming, and by golly, when your country goes to war, you're a young, able-bodied guy, you step up and go to war. They activated the Granite City, which is right across the river from our house, the Granite City CB unit. That's Construction Battalion, Navy Reserves. And I remember that was on the local news about the local guys were all going off to war, and they were interviewing the wives and stuff, and they're crying because their men going off to war, and what are they going to do? And I saw that, and I thought to myself, well, heck, if these married guys with kids can go off to do it, I can do it. So I went down shortly thereafter, and I enlisted in the Navy Reserve. I enlisted in the Navy Reserve because I had no intention of doing 20 years in the military, because like I said, this was still in the post-Vietnam. The military was a scary thing. And I thought, well, here's how I'll do. I'll go in, I'll join the reserves for the duration of the war, and after that they'll send me home, and if I like it, then it'll be easy enough to go active duty. So that's what I did. Me and another kid from St. Louis, I lived up in North County at the time, And another kid from like the next school district over. We both shipped out on the same day, and we went to boot camp and additional training together. What are you doing for it? So that's what I did. I was a night warehouse manager. The war came. I signed up to do my patriotic duty.
During training, do you recall any of your instructors or how they were?
Okay, I'm sorry. I enlisted. I was not drafted. Do you want me? Okay, yeah. So I enlisted. I chose the Navy Reserve because they were close to home. The CB guys, my hometown guys, are already going. That's your boys. The Navy, the Army didn't appeal to me. The Air Force didn't appeal to me. I was already too old to go in the Marine Corps. I was like 25 years old. So it seemed like the Navy was the same bet for an almost old guy. All right. So the day I departed for training camp, that was a good one. Again, in America now, we're used to war. We have all these video games. That wasn't what it was like back then. We didn't have all this constant, these cameras blowing stuff up, and people are so inured to it they don't even pay attention. The night before I shipped off, the news had been telling I'm not sure if there was what they called shock and awe or the one before that, where they pretty much everybody in America, we all knew to tune on the TV at this time, and they would show the American government blowing this place to smithereens. So everybody tuned in. It was kind of like my going away party. And so I started going to boot camp, just like the guys have done for 100, 200 years. And they show this blowing the heck out of everything. And I'm just sitting there on the couch, my jaw's about down to my belly button, thinking, holy smokes, what did I get myself into? I didn't sleep well that night, which is good because they come and get you like at 4:30 in the morning. My parents drove me down to the military examination processing station in St. Louis, and it was all history after that. All right, my early days of training, they shipped me, they gave me a big old envelope and said, whatever you do, don't lose this envelope. They took us to Lambert Airport, the airport in St. Louis, and threw us on the plane. I hugged this thing because I wasn't losing those darn orders in any way, shape, or form. We showed up in San Diego. It was I think by the time we got there, it was still dark. So it was weird because you're disorientated. You're in a different place. Because I think it was winter in St. Louis, and I get off the plane and they drive us around. And they don't talk to the bus was dead quiet. It wasn't like the movies where they all yell at you. The bus was dead quiet. Let's say there's 30 guys on this bus, and we're sitting there and it's dark. And again, nobody had iPads, nobody had nothing. You're just sitting there dark like, oh golly, what's going on? I had already cut my hair short, and I brought crappy ass clothes because I knew they were all getting thrown away. So I look like a homeless bum. But that was okay because what happened? Got off the bus, next day they cut your hair and threw all my clothes away. Some dudes brought like suitcases and books to read and stuff, and the drill instructors, which we called company commanders, were like, box that stuff up and get it out of here. So they were actually real cool. We kind of we pull into Naval Station San Diego or Recruit Training Command San Diego. And it was weird because it was, like I said, it was winter in St. Louis. And so I get there at San Diego, and it was dark, and the light and it was hitting it, and it looked like snow on the ground. And I'm like, what the hell is there snow on the ground in San Diego for? But only then later did I realize it was the moonlight hitting off the sand. So we go to boot camp, and they weren't yelling nothing. They were low-key guys. I had 3 very good boot camp instructors. Scully, Whittle, and the other one will come to me as soon as we turn this film off. They were real cool. They didn't yell. If somebody messed up, they'd say stuff like, praise in public and counsel in private. So wasn't any, I was expecting, all those boot camp movies, and it wasn't nothing like that at all. It was just kind of like show up, do your job, be cool, calm, and collected. It was... So I get into boot camp, and they put us in what's called holding company. That's where they're waiting for enough guys to get like approximately 75 to form a training company. Little did I know that because the war had broken out, seemingly a bunch of guys were backing out of their military obligation. And so we sat, because holding companies before us, they're like 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and they were getting the guys and getting them formed up. We get there, and nobody else is coming. Man, it seemed like we were in that holding company for a long time. They didn't give us no clothes. They gave us like sweatpants and a sweatshirt. They didn't give us underwear. They gave us 3 jock straps. I'm like, what? And a stocking cap. A stocking cap. I'm like, what the hell is? I felt like it was something from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But I figured they had a reason for not giving us underwear, but only giving us jock straps. I never figured out that was. I wish somebody would tell me still to this day why they gave us jock straps. I've never worn jock strap in my life, and next thing I had to wear, so it's like, dude. Anyway, I guess they were getting us used to being uncomfortable. Shortly thereafter, the daytime comes. I look up, and half the boot camp instructors are Filipinos, which was not what I was expecting. I'm like, where'd all these come from the Midwest? I'm like, where'd all these Filipinos come from? What are these? And you can tell they have a heavy accent, so they're like first generation Filipinos. A couple days later, a week or so, and a bunch of the recruits were in the companies above us. They're like, you look by these companies, and half the companies were Filipinos. I'm like, what's going on with this? So apparently, I found out like a joint service agreement where the Filipinos could come in, serve in the U.S. military, do their 20 years, and even be a Filipino national, and retire with a nice pension. Something happened. There was a volcanic explosion at Clark Air Base. The president of the Philippines said he didn't want to mess with the U.S. anymore. They wanted out of the agreement. So one morning we woke up, and it was like the boot camp just became white like that overnight. They didn't tell us what was going on. All the Filipino drill instructors disappeared, and I was like, what happened? And they said, hey, the Philippines said they didn't want to be with us no more. So I really remember that. So I think we were in boot camp for 7 days, 7 weeks. It's pretty much a stand around. Once we got teamed up, we bunch of standing around, bunch of shots in the butt. We were right next. Our training camp was right next to the Marine Corps. It was really weird because we were just kind of indoctrinated just to go slow and look miserable and unhappy. And they'd make us do stuff like line up for chow, which is mealtime, like with your shoulders crossed, and they'd say, nut the butt, nut the butt. And they would actually want you to stand nut the butt up to the next guy to see how many guys they could pack up at the same time. And we're all thinking to ourselves, well, this is pretty stupid, but there's a reason for doing it. And that's just to get you used to being packed in like a bunch of sardines, I guess. So we're standing with our hands like this, nut the butt, miserable, waiting to get our grilled cheese or whatever it was. And the Marine guys in boot camp, they'd come running in like little kids just out of recess. They'd be all happy and smiling. And I remember thinking, man, we're miserable. Those guys look like they're really having fun. And from that day onward, I really began to respect the Marines because they do a lot of stuff that nobody else wants to do. A lot of times I wished I was on the other side of that line, but as you know, they're not going to let you switch military in the middle of boot camp. So we were boot camp for 7 weeks, and then we got our orders to go to our additional training, which in the Navy is called A school, C school, whatever, the next level. I already forgot my terminology. After San Diego, where I was awarded, in my company, I was awarded the Honor Man for being like the good soldier boy, the good sailor. I didn't know I was nominated I didn't know I was getting the award. One day the company commander came up to me and gave me a chit, and he said, call home. I'm like, I thought somebody died. So called home, and they actually had like a phone booth, and you went up there. So I'm sitting over there calling phone, and some other guy comes over, hey, what are you doing talking on the phone? And I said, they told me to call home. I thought mom or dad was dead. And never mind, they left me alone. And so then I called up, and my parents said, hey, we're coming out to San Diego. And they said, you're getting some award for being a good soldier. And I'm like, okay, come on out. So by the end of boot camp, they had you pretty good beat in the head. So they came out. It was kind of weird to see my family again because you get used to seeing guys and like no little kids. And they came out, the Retired Officers Association gave me a little plate. I got my little picture for being the good soldier. After that, they sent us over to, they sent me, the other kid from St. Louis, and 5 other guys from our training company got sent to Port Hueneme for CB, construction builder training. That's what I looked like back in those days. That's green uniform. It was kind of funny because that was like the same uniform as our enemy, Iraq, had. So in due time, they took all away our green uniforms, which we like to call our Gomer Pyle greens. they took those away and gave us that cami stuff. And that was kind of cool because like we were the last guys. We're like, haha, we're old school, baby. They sent us off to U.S. Navy Construction Man Builder School in Port Hueneme, California. I believe that was 15 weeks. Every week you're there, there'd be like another class, or I think it was Friday, they'd have a big old formation, everybody, and they'd have orders like where all the guys are going. And it was almost, when you first get in there, they're all going straight over there, straight over to active duty. Even the reservists, they're like, man, you think, okay, in 10 more weeks that's gonna be us, 8 more weeks that's gonna be us. And it was okay, they just taught us how to be construction men. Now, there's all kind of abbreviations in the military, and a builder abbreviation in the Navy was BU. So I was, so builder, BU, but everybody else called it basically useless. Because like EOs, the equipment operators, they all learned how to like drive heavy equipment, and they could come out and get big paying dues, big paying jobs, where nobody told us that. We were like the shovel drivers. But it was a nice time. We had really nice guys. We had 4 guys in the barracks in one room, me and 3 other guys I went to boot camp with. And it was kind of like living in junior college, but you got paid. Some of the guys couldn't manage their money. I was a boring guy. I was the one who always had the bed made right. And you had to fill out a bunch of books if you wanted to get promoted. You had to do your work. And so I would stay in and do my paperwork. And I actually got promoted to Petty Officer 3rd class while I believe while I was still in training. So about our 10th week, when we went to the big old Friday or the whole, all 300 guys or whatever, and we were getting close to the end, and that was the first class where instead of sending the reservists over to active duty, they sent them back to their reserve training center. Some of them got sent back to the reserve training center, some of them still got sent there. We're like, man, so me and the other guys like, they gonna send us over there, or are they gonna send us home? And they didn't tell us nothing. There was no TV, there was no CNN. We still couldn't go off base. We couldn't go to Taco Bell. This was before the internet. So like, we're just kind of waiting and seeing what our life is gonna take. Eventually, it's our turn to graduate. I get the Honor Man Award again. And when it's time for us to go, to get your orders, you mark, they literally say your name, your hometown, and where you're going next. And I remember they said, Construction Man, Weir, St. Louis, Missouri, next duty station. It was like a game show, like where you're gonna go. Next duty station is U.S. Naval Reserve Center, St. Louis, Missouri. Woo-hoo! And I'm like, all right, because we found out the war was over. I'm like, well, okay, if the war is over, send me home. So they sent me home. I had enlisted on an 8-year stint, and the war's over. So they sent me back to St. Louis to do my reserve station, to do my reserve duty. They gave me like 2 weeks off. I do my first reserve duty. I show up at the drill facility, and nobody else is there. I'm like, what's up with that? Because you'd think there'd be like at least some officer or non-commissioned officer to at least tell you what's going on. There was nobody there. I kind of stood around like, what's up with this? I waited till like maybe noon, then I went home. And I called them back on Monday. Said, "Where the active duty guy?" I said, "Where was everybody?" He goes, "Oh, they're still overseas." I'm like, "Oh, okay, because you can't have no drill if the rest of the company's overseas." So I came back the next month or whatever, and we drilled in Granite City. Not a whole lot to do. You kind of did whatever little bit they needed done. 1 year, because you're in the reserves, you got to do 2 or 3 weeks annual training. I get my annual training. They sent me to Hollylock, Scotland. That was real good. That's when we're closing out a sub base. That was after the Soviet Union gave up shop, and we're gonna reap the peace dividend. The peace dividend. Remember that line? So I went over there. We helped close down a submarine base. There were hardly any active duty guys around. It was me. I drove around with 5 or 6 Scottish guys. Like, we'd go to the bowling alley, and I did a bunch of inventory, a bunch of tools we sent back to America. Another highlight of my reserve duty was they sent me to Hawaii. It was during Christmas break. I think it was a 3-weeker. They sent me to Hawaii. They sent me to Big Island Volcanoes National Park. And there's like a national park. Eisenhower used to vacation up there. Absolutely beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go to Big Island, Volcanoes National Park, go. I forgot we gutted something up there too, and once again, because I was like a college kid, I got put in charge of the warehouse. I drove around a little golf cart and counted tools, and my very last night there, we're in the bar, having like our little going away party, getting ready to go back, and the girl working the bar said, hey, you know, if you're in, I hope I don't go to jail for this. She said, hey, you know, if you're in the reserves in Hawaii, if you're in the National Guard, if you're in the reserves in Hawaii, you get free tuition. And I thought, wait a minute. Because back home, I wasn't getting free tuition because each state has their own little thing. And I thought, wait a minute. So if I live in Hawaii and I'm in the reserves, I'll get free tuition? She goes, yeah, brother, yeah. So I talked to my chief guy and I told him what's up. And in the morning time, everybody else got on that plane and went back to the mainland. I stayed behind in Hawaii. And I began trying to figure out, how is this going to work? How is a guy who left everything behind, has no relationships to anybody, how is he going to make this work? So I wanted to stay on the Big Island because the Big Island's really nice. I couldn't make a job of it. They wouldn't hire me. You walk into McDonald's and the ladies all have pins like 15 years service. So then you talk to people, because the Navy paid me good, so that's the money I had. And you talk to people like, oh, brother, you ain't getting no job. The Howleys, that's the white people, you come down and then you go home. I thought to myself, no wonder we go home because we can't get a job. Yeah, you couldn't get a job, so I bought a copy of the Honolulu Advertiser, and there was a job. They wanted somebody to work on a horse ranch in exchange for room and board. Paid $50, flew over, brought my boots, and they gave me a job. From that job, I had a place to stay and a place to sleep. I transferred from the Navy Reserve to the Hawaii Army National Guard because the Navy Reserve doesn't have the same academic benefits as the Navy. The Navy doesn't have the same benefits. The National Guard, that's where you get your free tuition. So I switched over to Hawaii Army National Guard. Am I completely off track?
No, you're doing good.
All right. Did use or specialized training. I learned how to be an instruction man. I came home. I tried to get a job. All those jobs were union back then. Nobody would hire you. They'd say you have to go back and get in our training, and they were not welcoming to veterans in any way, shape, or form back then. It was kind of like I felt like it was a big slap in the face. We got all the training, but it wasn't the union authorized training, and none of us could get jobs with what we had. So like, wait a minute, we just did it, but we can't do it because we're not your nephew. Okay. Friendships and camaraderie. Because there were like 7 guys I went to boot camp and A school with. So when Facebook first came out, there hasn't always been Facebook. Facebook was a new thing. And it was real fun when Facebook first came out. You could actually look up people that you hadn't seen in a long time to see what they were doing. Like the first year of Facebook was great. So I looked them all up. A couple of them are in politics and one's in St. Louis. And it was really nice. But I see the guy from St. Louis about every other year or so. But I haven't kept in touch with any of them other than when Facebook first came out, we chatted a little bit. They're all alive and doing fine, I'm sure. I kept in touch with my family and friends back home. That was before the internet. We had to do this thing called take out a piece of paper and write. And I remember boot camp, they'd actually make you write letters home. It was, I don't know if they still do that, but that's how we kept in contact. You had to kind of like make an appointment to use the phone. What did you do for recreation while you were off duty? Well, my only time when I was on duty, I was in training, and I didn't really have much recommend. I didn't have much off-duty time because I was always doing my books and studying. I was the little squared-away soldier boy. Oh yeah, they took a picture of me, and I was sleeping like at attention. And the joke was Weir even. They thought I was like a Mr. Serious guy, and they said Weir even sleeps at attention. So I didn't. I just stayed on base. We went to, because the war was going on, they would come around and give us, and we're out in Los Angeles, Port Manimi's close to Los Angeles, they'd give us tickets like to Dodgers games and go to Disneyland and stuff. One of the guys had a car, we'd go down there. It was kind of weird because it was wartime, so we had to wear little uniforms, but we were in the military, but we weren't actually seeing the action. So like we'd go out and everybody would treat us like we were somebody. It was there's still kind of a guilt to this day because like, we're in boot camp. These other guys are getting killed over there. We're in boot camp. We come out of boot camp. We got a pocket full of money. And like you go to Denny's and people, oh, no, soldier. No, sailor. We got this. They'd buy everything. The only other excitement was we were standing on the corner. Like, Hollywood and Vine or something in California, one of those famous streets, and we're standing there in our little white, little navy uniforms with our little hats, and somebody drove by like with a pneumatic staple gun and shot at us and hit one of the dudes in the neck. But it didn't go in very far. Just like, holy smoke, somebody just you were just in a drive-by in Los Angeles. So that was all right. So where was I when the war ended? I assume I was in boot camp, but they really didn't tell us the war ended. I remember we couldn't sing in boot camp because there was a war going on. But the war, I assume I was in boot camp, and even after the war ended, they were still over there. So I was somewhere in California receiving training. How did I return home? I don't remember. I assume they gave me a ticket, and I got on the plane and went back. And I know it wasn't by train and it wasn't by car. How are you received by your family and community? I guess this was after the war, when I came back to civilian life. I don't have any recollection of that in any way, shape, or form. Oh, it was more of the same, because I had what we called the grinder reminder, because you always had to wear a hat and you're walking around California. So the hat was like this. So this was all nice color brown, and above that was all white. And he had the short hair. We called it the grinder reminder because the grinder was the pavement where I was marked. So like you go out and everything, and people could tell you're military because you're still skinny. You got a funny suntan, and so people would still be buying you beers. Like you go, hey soldier, and they give you beer. So that takes care of the boot camp body real fast. But no, everybody was nice to me. I had a couple friends like before I went off to war said, man, don't become a war pig. And that's just leftover 70 hippies crap. No, I didn't know anybody who was a war crap my whole time. A war pig who was my entire time there. Everybody I know just wanted to do their job and come home. How did you readjust to civilian life? I came home to they saved my job for me, the night warehouse guy. I hated that shit. I was like, man, this is horrible. So I did that like for 3 or 4 months, and I enrolled and went to college. I lost my discipline between high school and 25 or whatever. The military allowed me the opportunity to rediscover my own discipline. The only discipline is self-discipline. That put me back on the right track. When I went back to school the next time, I was honor student, magna cum laude, all that stuff. I still say that going in the military really helped me a second chance to get back on the fast track. Have you remained in contact with any United fellow veterans? My brothers, I see them about once a week. Are you a member of any veterans organization? I am a member of the American Legion Post 961 in beautiful historic downtown Fairmont City, Illinois. I serve in the dual capacity as both chaplain and as adjutant commander. That means I say the prayer and I take the minutes. We have a nice little town. We have like 33 active members. 3 of the guys who show up regularly are still World War II veterans, and it's an honor to sit in the same room with guys. The stories they tell, it's humbling. It's kind of like this, but sorry, I get to do it better because there's a bunch of them. And you guys, sorry, by the time you see this, these guys are the true American heroes are probably passed away. And I hope that we can, in some small way, continue to emulate them and do what needs to be done for the best of our country. I'm glad I didn't join the American Legion for a long time. I'm glad I did. Our post is limping along. We sold the building. Now it's the public library. It's better off as a public library than as a beer drinking hall. Things change. You got to roll with the punches. What have you done since separating from the military? Well, I graduated from the University of Hawaii with a bachelor's degree in Chinese.
Hello, this is Matthew Harris again. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties, so we are going to continue our interview with Mr. Weir here. So I will turn it over to you where we left off.
Thank you. How did my wartime experiences affect your life? As I was on active duty during wartime, but I didn't actually see combat. Probably the vast majority of veterans throughout American history, that's exactly what they did. It's very few and select ones who actually were called upon to do the dirty work. It's very humbling. You always feel like because you're a veteran, but you didn't see any action as somehow that you cheated or that you did less. And the older I get, you just realize that's luck of the draw. You feel bad for like the guys who got drafted and got killed, and it's like It's almost like you're a bingo ball, and then your number gets called, you go. And for me, it ended well. My body's intact. I definitely have a stronger sense of patriotism, and I pay much more attention to international events because the last thing I want to see is more poor American kids getting blown up and forget some godforsaken piece of shit for some stupid politician's war. What are some of the life lessons you learned from the military service? Always be early, show up, be on early, keep a good attitude. Everybody's job sucks to one degree or another. But just because it sucks doesn't mean you gotta tell everybody it sucks. Bite down, grin and bear it, and get through it, and get to the end of the day and go do what you want to do. How has your military service impacted your feeling about the war and military in general? War. I don't know if it's a necessary evil or not, but it's evil. About the only reason we have war, Sun Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, the Art of War guy, I believe it was him, maybe it was Confucius. One of them said, war and politics are opposite ends of the same stick. If you're winning with one side, particularly, if you're winning with the politics, you don't need to use the war. You only use the war when you can't get what you want through politics. Hopefully, we can stop electing presidents who have never served a day in their life. And that also goes for our congressmen and senators. If anything, having that experience of standing there for tasks for somebody who died for what you all believe in is a good thing. And just regardless of your political affinity, hiring these guys who never spent a second in uniform to be the commander of the most powerful military in the most powerful country in the world is kind of a head scratcher. War is evil. Don't do it unless you got to. Try to avoid it. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear this interview? Thank you for listening through 32 minutes of drivel. We really appreciate it. It was my honor to serve my country. I shall continue to serve my country. I invite you to serve your country. It doesn't have to be anything big. Go to the corner, pick up the trash, help the old lady down the street, pick up her dog shit in her backyard. If we all do a little bit, it'll all get a lot better. Service is the only true leadership is service. And is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview? If so, what? No, thank you. God bless America. Everybody who will see this in 100 years when I'm dead. The freedom we have now, it seems like every year our freedom gets a little less and less. I promise you I shall try to fight so that you will still be able to stand in your street and drink beer. Because that's, yeah. Freedom's only as much as we get it. I'll keep working. Hopefully someday you'll pick up the baton and you will also strive to continue our freedom. Thank you very much. Thank you for the folks who provided the funding for our library. Thank you very much to our fine videographer. Thank you very much. Have a good life.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weir.